Hancock had to say, because this is a very key point as we move through these. Is
that my clip or yours?
No, this is mine. Yeah.
And even if you've had the jab, you're not immune because the vaccine will not fully protect you until 7 days after you've received the second dose. And we don't yet know if it'll stop you from passing on the disease to other people. So we have to all keep acting as if we can still pass it on, and that is the safest way to get the number of cases down and keep people safe.
Now this is really critical, Patrick, because if we go back to this graphic again, that means that the numbers after dose 1 really aren't relevant because you're not protected in any way, according to Matt Hancock, until after 7 days following the second dose. So the 1 in 9 we can forget about. So let's move on to this graphic, which shows severe cases. This is the first severe COVID-19 occurrence from 7 days after dose 2 in participants without evidence of prior SARS-CoV-2 infection. And in that case, 7 days after dose 2, when you're supposed to be protected by this vaccine, there were, out of 18,198, there was 1 severe case on the vaccinated side and 3 severe cases on the unvaccinated side, on the placebo side. Okay, so just to highlight that, that's the vaccinated side, that's the placebo side. So if we put that into a graphic here, well, we can see that there is effectively nobody affected on the vaccinated side, but equally there is nobody affected in the control group. And again, where's the evidence of the pandemic? There is none. So let's remind ourselves what this said once again. It said in mid-November, analysis of 36,621 participants, randomized 1-to-1, 8 COVID-19 cases in the vaccine group, 116 COVID-19 cases in the placebo group, of which 1 was serious in one group and 3 were serious in the other. So how are they getting this 95%? Well, they're talking about relative risk and they're doing a calculation. Now, it doesn't matter if not everybody follows this calculation. We'll just run through it. If you take the 8 and divide it by the number of people in the vaccine group, you get that number 0.00044. If you take the 162 and divide that by the number of people in the control group, which is the same, you get 0.00885. You divide those to get 0.0049, and then you do a quick calculation to turn that into percentage, and you get 95%. Right? That's called relative risk. It's the relative risk between the number of people who were infected on both sides of the trial. This tells us nothing about the efficacy of the vaccine, and it tells us nothing about the actual risk that we are experiencing, what we need to look like. So we're going to put a big X on that.
It's statistical wizardry.
It's statistical wizardry. What we need to do to get a better picture of this is to look at absolute risk reduction. What's the absolute risk reduction? And you use the same figures, and you start off with the same calculation. You end up with 0.0044, 0.00885, but you don't divide them at this point. You subtract one from the other, you get 0.00841 as the result. You turn that into percentage. This is the absolute risk reduction, 0.8%. There is only a 0.8% absolute less chance that you're going to end up with COVID if you're vaccinated as if you're unvaccinated, in which case, why are we rolling out a global vaccination campaign?
It's a total corporate whitewash, and the politicians are basically sucking this up from AstraZeneca, from Pfizer, from Moderna, and regurgitating it to the public as if 95% effective, trust us. This is what Pfizer told us, so just trust us. And then the people are repeating that out on the street. You hear people out in the street. I was in a black cab recently, and the black cab driver, we're talking about vaccines. He's saying, well, I like the Pfizer one. I prefer that. It's a bit more effective. It's 96%, I think. And the AstraZeneca, it's not as effective. It's about 94. So they've got the public basically comparing corporate brands on vaccines, parroting these completely whitewashed, bogus statistical claims that are being made by Matt Hancock. They're being made by other health ministers. And when you drill down to it, as you've shown, Mike, There's no provenance whatsoever.
None.
In these claims.
None. And so there's no evidence of pressure on the NHS. We've shown that. There's no evidence that this vaccine is going to do anything. We've shown that. So, and over the months, we've shown that actually there's no evidence of a real pandemic there at all. It's a pseudo-pandemic. So what is going on?
And there's no evidence that lockdown reduces the spread of the virus.
That is true. And as Matt Hancock has acknowledged, there's no evidence that the vaccine is going to reduce the spread of the virus. Because if, and you're talking about asymptomatic spreaders earlier on.
The myth of. Yeah.
But are they using this vaccine creating those people? Because what the vaccine actually doesn't produce immunity against anything. All it does is suppress the symptoms, and therefore you potentially are spreading a virus, if there is a virus.
You're creating asymptomatic spreaders. Yes. And so this argument isn't being made by us. This was actually being floated out by a lot of people, including Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who said this exact thing in a recent interview with Alec Baldwin on Instagram. Okay, he said this. This is a real risk. This is why it takes 4 to 10 years to develop a vaccine, because it takes time to look at these things. You don't do what Matt Hancock is suggesting, which is to vaccinate everybody and then monitor to see what the effects are. We don't know yet if it's going to be, if they're going to be able to spread it or not or whatever, making claims of immunity. He's made claims of immunity. Other government officials have said you get immunity from this vaccine. And they contradict themselves in the same sentence, saying that actually, no, you're not going to be immune, you can still spread it. I mean, what are these people talking about? They're just making it up as they go along. And I think the pharmaceutical companies are pretty much doing the same thing because they've found a soft touch with all of these politicians who are desperate for a solution, desperate to defeat COVID and to take credit for it. Whether it's Trump, Biden, Hancock, or Boris Johnson, everybody wants to have VE Day against COVID and then suck up all the glory for that, okay? So just to end off this with a bit of common sense, this is Professor Dr. Sucharit Bhakdi from the